Okay.
Oh, wow.
I think we're live.
Oh, yes.
Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you.
My name is Louise. I am the research director at the Center for Innovative GYN Care. And today I'm really excited because we have two wonderful, beautiful, fun women who are former patients who I met through a mutual friend, but also through our research nurse, Leah Hayworth. And how often do you get to talk to two women, two married women, and by that I mean to each other, who had their fibroids removed 2 days apart. So we're really eager to hear their story and hear a little bit more about their experience. And I want you guys to do most of the talking, but I do have to note that it's Fibroid Awareness Month. And why do we even need a Fibroid Awareness Month? I was thinking about this. It's because by the time you hit 50, 80% of women have fibroids. Isn't that crazy? And half of those women have symptoms, and that's a huge deal because that involves a lot of pain and bleeding and bowel problems, as you guys know, and also potentially fertility issues. I mean, you only have one body, so you don't really know what's normal and what's too much pain. And so that's why I think it's super important that we keep talking to each other and we keep sharing our experiences. And so with that, I'd like to, maybe Carolyn, you'd like to start. Carolyn and Dione, which one? Carolyn? I'm going to pick Carolyn. Okay. Carolyn. Tell us a little bit about what you do, about your story, and your symptoms. A little bit about your journey.
Okay, so first of all, I'm a teacher. I will say that I'm a teacher and a coach, and I've coached soccer. This year, I'm going to be coaching field hockey. So when I was in my late 30s, about 37, 38, I was wanting to get pregnant, and so I had to go to the fertility specialist to figure out, first of all, as a lesbian, how was I going to get pregnant? What was the best course? And I wanted it to be successful. So they ran the battery of tests. And at the time, they said I had 2 small fibroids and that I could, most people could, still get pregnant with the fibroids that size. So I went ahead and proceeded, and about 14 months later, I did get pregnant, and I ended up miscarrying at about, I think it was 13 weeks. And they said it was because I had a fibroid about the size of a grapefruit. Okay.
What? Hold on. So did they not talk to you about maybe taking these fibroids out before you started that process? Because we know that they just continue to grow, right?
Yes. So, this was a long time ago. So I'm going to say I don't recall. Yeah. I remember them saying that at that time that we could proceed, and because they were small enough that it shouldn't hinder the fertility process.
So you probably would have remembered had they mentioned that you should have them removed.
Right? Yes. Yeah, it definitely wasn't that I should have it removed because I was still being seen by a host of a medical team at the time. So that was the first, so that's when I was diagnosed with it, but it wasn't notable to me because I continued on with the fertility process. So it wasn't until afterwards, and when I miscarried and they said, you have a fibroid about the size of a grapefruit, and this needs to be removed because that's probably what has, caused the miscarriage. So, and then after that, I went ahead and got a consult from my OBGYN and ended up having open surgery at the time to have it removed. So that was the beginning of my journey. That wasn't the end of my journey with fibroids.
Well, no, especially having open myomectomy, I'm sure that couldn't have been easy.
It was actually, that surgery was horrible for me. Like I said, I've been a coach. I've been very active my whole life, and it was horrible. It was a brutal surgery for me because the recovery time was over 2 months just to get back to work and to regular activity, but I couldn't start working out again until 6 months later.
Wow. Wow. I mean, did your doctor talk to you about alternatives, or did you just trust your doctor was, directing you on the right path?
I don't recall any alternatives other than open surgery at that time.
Exhibit A.
So
But
I don't
half of surgeons don't bring up alternatives when it comes to open, and that's something that we're trying to change. Okay, sorry.
because they said it was so big that that's what they needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward, then they came back. They came back, several of them. Then the last time I had them, they were monitoring 4 or 5, but one specific one. And now I'm in my early 50s, and they recommended there were other issues besides the fibroids at that point. Then I had a cyst on my ovary, and so they recommended having a hysterectomy at that point.
Okay.
And that is when I went to CIGC to meet with Dr. D and get a consult. That's the short of it.
Okay. And I have many questions for you, and I'm sure that the audience has questions too. So please feel free to jump in. We'd like to hear about your experience. If you had open surgery, did the doctor mention laparoscopic surgery as an option? Did they insist open was the way to go? And if so, why? So any of that I think would be really interesting. So Dione, did you have a similar experience?
So mine was a little different. And at the time Carolyn went through her process, she and I did not yet know one another. I actually grew up in Louisiana, and I left home when I was 22, 23 to join the military. So I was in the military. I had annual medical evaluations plus, right? So whenever I deployed to a ship, or whenever I had to travel outside of the US, I would have medical screenings. And so I'd always had a heavy period. I thought it was normal, didn't think anything of it. And then I left the military, did an exit physical, joined the federal government as a law enforcement officer. So had medical screenings there. And it wasn't until I went to a new gynecologist. I had moved several places. I was in Maryland, finally moved to Maryland, and I was looking for a local gynecologist. So I visited someone, and she was the first person who verbally told me, I think you have a fibroid. So she sent me to get an ultrasound, have it checked. And I later went back and reviewed some of my paperwork from the federal government, the military. And sure enough, there in my medical records was a note that I had a fibroid, but it wasn't brought to my attention until I went to the new gynecologist. I'd even been to, the VA, several different places. It was not brought to my attention.
And do you think that was simply because they thought, well, it's a benign growth and we don't want to take you out of active duty status?
In a roundabout way, yes. I think it was nothing that precluded my travel for the government. And so it wasn't something that needed to be addressed immediately. That's what I believe. And so it wasn't brought to my attention. It was in my medical record. They annotated it, and I didn't know any different.
Question. At that time, they ever ask if you wanted to have kids?
They did not. No one ever asked me if I wanted to have kids.
Interesting. Okay. And did you, because later I know we've had some conversations in the past where you said that there was a family history, but you didn't know about it. So like, how did you find out that you actually, it was common in your family?
So it's interesting because Carolyn had done some research for you guys, and she asked me to join the research groups. So there I am in the research groups, and you talk about your medical history, and I am annotating in the medical history that I've never had a fibroid. I don't have any family history. And I don't know if it's generational, if it's a Southern thing, but my parents never really wanted to talk about their medical history in front of us kids. And so it always made it very difficult, because what's the first thing you do when you go to the doctor? They ask you about your medical history. So to the best of my knowledge, I would fill it out. My mother had never talked about having fibroids, but I have a cousin who she knows all of the family history, cousin Colette. So I happened to be talking to cousin Colette, and I said, I have this fibroid. And she said, oh, I had a fibroid. My mother had a fibroid. So my aunt, her sister had a fibroid. We have fibroids that run in our family. So that was when I initially found out that I had a medical history of fibroids. And she said, in fact, I think I remember from my mom that your mom had fibroids.
Wow.
So that's how I found out.
Wow. I'm wondering if anyone in the audience has a similar experience, whether their family communicated about GYN issues. If there were, was that an open topic, or yeah, that's interesting, and obviously we all need to be talking about it more. I'm curious, Dione, do you know how large your fibroid was?
Well, my fibroid was larger than Carolyn's fibroid, larger than that grapefruit. And let me just say,
yeah,
right. If I may back up, my mother and I were very close. So, we talked about a lot. My mother owned a florist. I worked for my mother before joining the military. We were together a lot. And probably before leaving for the military, I would say that she was one of my closest and dearest friends.
Wow. And
we just did not talk about those things. And the same thing with my father. My father and I were very close. I was the baby girl. I was, daddy's little girl. And he hated anyone to go to the doctor with him, because it was just personal information. And so, as close as I was to my parents, I still did not fully know their medical history. And yes, my fibroid was so big they had to cut it into pieces to remove it.
So I'm going to interject here for a moment, because I was in the process of scheduling my surgery to have mine removed and to have the hysterectomy. And Dione comes back from the doctor and says, they say I have a fibroid that's taking up my entire uterus. And this was probably right when I was ready to schedule surgery. But then that's when we started having this dialogue of, okay, what does this mean? You're going to now need surgery, because they said after my consult with Dr. D, I said, Dione, you need to go see Dr. D too and get a consult there. And so that's when I pushed my surgery back, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that, what that was like for us to schedule it, because then we found out hers was just as important to get done kind of in a timely manner as mine.
Okay. What other decisions went into that to have them done? I know you guys were trying to schedule for the same day initially, right?
Yes, we did. I know people at work were like, what are you doing? What? Who's going to take care of who?
Right.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And what the recovery was like. I'm skipping around a little bit, but that's just such a unique story. I've never heard anything like this. I want to hear who was the bigger wimp, who had more gas pains. Did you have similar experiences?
So I'll tell you, I'm going to start. So we decided we were back and forth. And then when in looking at our schedule, and as a teacher, it's really hard to take time off during the year. And this was I was trying to schedule it for the end of the summer, beginning of the school year, when I felt like it's always tricky just to figure out when you're going to be out. And my only point of reference for surgery was to be off for those 2 months. And they were like, no, it's going to be 1 week, 1 to 2 weeks. That's it. You're going to be great. And you're healthy, you're fit. It should be great. So then when Dione found out about hers, it pushed it back to more. We thought, let's do it at Thanksgiving. And our reasoning was this. When I had it, she had to take off work at least for a week. And then when I had it, then she'd have to take off we were thinking, well, then how are we both going to manage taking off this much time to take care of one another? How about we bring in our incredible circle of women, and we have it at the exact same time. I have 2 sisters. We have lots of nieces, aunties. I have a daughter. So we were like, let's just bring in this circle of women and have them come in and take care of us. Of course, we ran that by them before we decided to do this. So that's how that happened. And then we thought, well, then we don't really always during the school year get to spend as much time together. So we were like, well, now we get to hang out for a few weeks together too.
Yeah, absolutely. And just speaking of timing and jobs, I was just thinking, if you had gone with an open, also known as abdominal surgery, that would have also had a really big impact on your jobs with a 6 to 8 week recovery. And you said actually that you weren't running around for 6 months.
Yeah, to actually get moved, like to exercise and start working out again. The first time.
Personal question. Are you ready?
Ready.
It depends.
She's ready.
No,
she's ready.
Okay. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to being married as a lesbian couple and maybe how you were treated, of course, by our physicians, but also in the past. Like, did you ever feel discriminated against by a surgeon or a fertility clinic? Or I think this is still relevant. Things have gotten much better, of course, but I think it's still an issue.
You want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay.
I said you're ready.
Okay. So I will say my past OBGYN was excellent, and I didn't feel discriminated against at all. I was open. I loved every doctor in the practice. It wasn't, I will tell you, at the fertility center I went to, I did not get a good vibe at all from the nurse to the doctor to, the people that are assigned to you. They're always like, here's your one contact as far as a nurse. You can call them. I definitely did not feel a good vibe, welcome. There was nothing blatant, but I just didn't have a good feeling. And I'm somebody that trusts that.
And I believe it. I think also part of it is if you're coming in as an older woman, compared to a 25-year-old, 24-year-old, they're all about the numbers and success rates. And I think that may also play into it. But discrimination is still an issue. And I was really surprised to read this study. It came out just 2 years ago by Harvard that said a sixth of LGBTQ people have experienced discrimination at the doctor's office. And a fifth avoid healthcare appointments due to this word. And that's just 2 years ago where, I felt like we were making a lot of, and by saying we, of course, I am in that category too. We were making a lot of progress, but still, obviously, some work needs to be done.
Well, you ask if I ever felt discriminated against. It's tough because I was in the military during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell process. So you could serve and be gay as long as no one knew you were gay. So it's a tough environment. And so, as you go to the doctors, I don't know, it's tough.
Yeah.
I didn't have any kids. I was not, for the most part, for the most time, married.
Yeah.
I've been married to a male before, so a fellow military member, but we were always separated with deployments. We rarely lived together. And it's so quick. The process of military medicine is to make sure you're medically fit to deploy.
Yeah.
And so, I felt like in the military for a while, I lived in a atmosphere of discrimination because I knew I could not be openly myself.
Yeah, that must have been very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how is it with Dr. D, Dr. Danilians? I know you guys are like her favorite patients.
So
Dr. D was great. I ask a lot of questions.
Good, as you should.
To my health. And so Dr. D, she fielded all of my questions. I feel like she's a bit of an introvert. She can be kind of quiet, but she took as much time as I needed. She made sure she was available, and whatever question I had, she fully addressed it. Because, a lot of times we feel like we're women, so we should know all about our female organs. And that just is not the case, especially when you're talking to a doctor who's, that's their job. And so, I was not bashful about asking my questions.
Good.
She answered them all.
Up to the last minute.
To the last minute.
The last minute before she got put under.
What do you mean by that?
So, yeah, she had questions. When Dr. D came in to do the surgery, Dione was just like, Doc, are you okay today? Dione had questions up to the last minute. I was there she went first.
I went first. Yes.
Yeah. As you know, I had a hysterectomy with the practice because I run the complication numbers, and out of 160 surgeons, their complications are the lowest. So I didn't really dare to go anywhere else. And I know the average time they take for hysterectomies. And so when it was my turn, I'm like, okay, it doesn't take time. Doesn't have to be 56 minutes, just, yeah, but they do so many of them, and that's what makes them, they're so efficient and so good at what they do.
They're efficient and they're quick, but they're still very personable. You still get personalized service.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
Yes. And I experienced from the very beginning until I still see them because I'm on, they regulate some hormone therapy. And so I just feel like at any time I can call. I mean, we're now 2.5 years out, and I still feel like for anything I can call, I can get a immediate response. I can get in and see either the doctor or the nurse practitioner. I can see anybody and get answers for any concerns I still have.
Right. And with that being said, I needed a little extra paperwork because I'm in a field that requires physical fitness. So when I had my surgery, that meant I was not physically fit for duty. So, they had to fill out the paperwork saying that was the case. I was having surgery. And then after my follow-up, there was additional paperwork for evaluation. The doc saying, okay, yep, she's, fully recovered. Now she's back to full medical readiness. So,
and did she talk to you about going through menopause and how to kind of avoid going through menopause? I know for some people who have a hysterectomy, they don't necessarily have their ovaries taken out, so that's irrelevant. But then for others who do, did she put you on an estrogen?
Yes, but she talked to me about every single option. I at 52 and a half hadn't even started menopause. So she was like, I'm going to recommend something, but you've got to make your own, here she laid out all the different options. And of course I was like, I don't want to go straight into it. So,
Right.
My favorite question is always to say, Doc, what would you do if all these symptoms were yours? So I decided, yes, I'm on a patch, and it's, I won't say it's just magical, but it is, because I have fewer symptoms than Dione.
So I had a partial.
Okay.
So that was not really a concern for me.
Life better now? So it's been 2 years?
It's been 2 years.
Fully recovered?
Totally.
Yeah. I bet you're missing your period.
No.
Well, it's interesting because we were both very heavy. We had very heavy periods. And so we thought that was normal.
Yeah.
Because it was the same. We only had
it was
one another
extreme.
to compare. And it was very heavy. So we no longer have those heavy periods.
Yes. By the time I went in to have my surgery, before I went in for my consult at CIGC, when I had seen my other OBGYN, they had said that I probably could use a transfusion every month because I was losing that much blood.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was like, let's just get this done. Let's just take care of this.
Yeah.
And we didn't know any different because it was the same in the household.
Yeah. I mean, there's one perk, right, is that you can compare to your one partner, but for most women, they really don't have a way to compare. And I suspect that a lot of women do have these GYN conditions and they don't know about it.
But I also want to bring up that I have 2 older sisters and then my mom, and we all had the same symptoms. We all had the same heaviness. So I was like, what's going on? This is normal. We all thought it was normal, but my oldest sister had a history of severe fibroids, and she ended up having to have surgery as well.
She did.
Yes.
I have an audience question or comment I'm going to address, okay?
Okay.
I'm curious how much laparoscopic versus abdominal fibroidectomies, wrong word, I think, have changed in the last 15 years or so. I had 14 centimeter one removed. It was pedunculated. About that time, went into surgery with 80% chance that they'd be able to get it laparoscopically. When doctor got in there, he didn't like the look at it, reluctant to break it up and remove it. And ended up going to abdominal surgery. Okay, ladies, I would like to take this comment.
Yes.
Okay. And that's why these conversations are so important.
Absolutely.
So many women can relate to your stories, and it's so it's important to emphasize that in 98% of the cases, open surgery is not necessary. And one of my favorite studies, and the last time I did a Facebook Live event, I brought this up because I think it's so powerful. All right, so in 2010, that's the researcher Arnonson, very well known in the GYN community, he asked OBGYNs if they had to have a hysterectomy or their spouse had to have one, which route would they suggest? Which one would they go for? All right, 8% said open. Now, what percent of women are undergoing open today? Between 40 and 50%. And I think about that 8%, and I think maybe they felt guilty because that was the way they were doing it, so they felt like they should put that. But most of them said laparoscopic. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. When I was doing a study at a local hospital, I realized that there were a lot of OBGYNs that were really just doing OB stuff and no GYN. 80% of the surgeons did 10 or less per year. But of those, there were the majority of them did one surgery over a 3-year period. I don't want to be that patient. I mean, imagine if you had to get on a plane. Do you go with a pilot that flies once every few years? Do you go with a pilot that flies like 1,500 to 2,000 times a year? I mean, right? They have your life in their hands, and that's the way I think that we should be thinking about it. And I'm guilty as well for not asking for a second opinion. But now I think with more information out there, we can be Googling things. My hope is that more people will start looking for surgical specialists, not to divorced from an OBGYN and, let your OBGYN do your regular annual care, but then to seek a surgical specialist for your myomectomy, hysterectomy, advanced GYN conditions. We did a couple interesting studies, and when I asked people if they felt the need to seek a second opinion, let me just show you the graph on that one. Can you see this?
Yeah.
So
the blue is no second opinion, I would guess.
Yeah, so about 80% didn't feel the need to seek a second opinion. But then when we asked, would you recommend this surgery to friends and relatives, the people that underwent open, 77% said that they would. So it seemed like their satisfaction was tied to the relationship with their OBGYN.
That's somewhat understandable.
Yeah. Like
yeah,
I had
it, right? You get it.
I had a great relationship with mine, but that's all I knew at the time. And I trusted them, and I still think they're phenomenal, but was it the best? Like now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that the surgery
was an option.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. And
now looking back, you were chosen.
Yes, because it definitely impeded, all my day-to-day activities for a much longer period of time.
Yeah. Our goal is really to create this symbiotic relationship with the OBGYN, where we just say, we'll take the complex cases, GYN cases, and then send patients back to you. So stealing patients. So we really want to kind of develop those relationships, because, if you're only doing a 10 a year or even less, they just simply don't have the skill or experience to do the surgery laparoscopically. And I mean, if you can imagine, so this is a laparoscopic surgery, looks like this, right? Mm-hmm. And it's quite typical. You have a camera in there, and you have to do the sutures with this little thing at the end and loop. It's difficult. You can imagine if I cut across like this and then open it up like this, I see everything. I can do all the sutures with my hand. I can tie the knots with my hand. So it's just a much easier surgery. And unfortunately, many of the surgeons just aren't offering the option to refer to a surgical specialist. So I guess that's one of the reasons why we're trying to have some more of these kind of conversations. If you want to compare to our surgery volume, I think I mentioned it, between 1,500 and 2,000. It's that plus their unique surgical technique that brings their complication rate really low when they're so experienced. And honestly, I would definitely not be doing this if the complication rates were high, but I do them myself, and we've actually published them in peer-reviewed journals. So I invite everyone to look them up. It's under my name and the surgeon's name, because it is quite impressive when you compare our complication rate to robotic, which is 3 times as high, or open, which is can be up to 3 to even 5 times as high. So we really want to get the word out that there are alternatives. And I'm trying to read some comments as I go through here. But what I hear over and over again from our qualitative research from the surveys, that women say that their physicians said their case was too complicated, or their uterus was too big, or their fibroids were too big, and so that they had to do abdominal. And I have a little demonstration here. First of all, so I ran these numbers myself. This is the weight of all the uterine weights that we took out. This is difficult to show. So this is us right here. It goes up to 9,000. That's a uterus. It's a uterus filled with fibroids. And then these are this is open. Here's robotic. You can see this. Now that's 9,000. Do you know what that looks like? I'm sitting on it. Here we go. I weighed this.
Mm-hmm.
So just imagine this. Our surgeons are taking this out laparoscopically. I mean, they can't do this in 56 minutes.
Yeah.
They're taking this time, to cut it up and take it out, rather than open a huge scar across the belly, resulting in 8 weeks of surgery. It really is quite remarkable. So I did want to bring that up, because it is possible to take out all different kinds of sizes laparoscopically. It's always like vegetables and fruits. It's never like a baseball or softball. Have you ever seen what the fibroids look like when they take it out?
We got pictures. We definitely get pictures.
It's like,
isn't that right?
Like
raw, we got pictures.
Fatty chicken or something.
Yes.
Yes.
It doesn't look like fruit.
Yeah.
So back to our audience. Is there anything that we could answer for you, Dione and Carolyn? I'd love to answer some questions, or for me as a research director. I think maybe one thing that we didn't mention is that when they're taking this out laparoscopically, it's just 2 tiny ports. And 13% of the time they'll use a third port. But I actually challenged one of my colleagues to find, and then she couldn't find it. So it's through the belly button and then right on the bikini line. So it's like virtually indetectable.
Yes.
You compare that to robotic, they have up to 7 ports or 7 incisions. So that's another thing that makes the technique quite unique, is just having those 2 very small incisions. And because of that, you're not cutting through the entire stomach, so you can be up and around fairly quickly.
Yes. So I had 2 incisions, and a full hysterectomy, but Dione had to have 3, and she had the partial, because that her fibroid, they said, took up her entire uterus. I don't think it was the size of that watermelon, because she's not that big. But
the cantaloupe.
The cantaloupe. Anyway, so she had the 3rd one. So we had a few differences in our recovery. Not many, but a few.
So we have another comment from audience member. It said she was happy to hear the talk about the symptoms of the heavy bleeding, because so many women think that it's normal.
Mm-hmm.
But it may not be. The blood loss left me with almost no iron in my blood.
Yes.
I have to have iron supplements before I was a candidate for even laparoscopic surgery. Was that something that you were doing before surgery as well?
So I didn't need to take the iron supplements. So I altered my diet quite a bit, and I had always been a blood donor from the time I was 18 on, and I had to stop giving blood because I had become anemic, because I was losing so much blood. And my OBGYN was like, you can't give blood anymore. You need to start, you need to pump up your iron in other ways. So I was able to regulate it without supplements, but based on diet. But I definitely had to alter some things.
Right. What advice can we give women, what would you guys say? I mean, one should probably talk to some family members, right?
Mhm.
It gives you a hint that maybe what you're experiencing isn't normal. I think that was a really good takeaway. But would you agree that going to your OBGYN for like your regular visits to continue to do that, but to seek a second opinion?
Okay. So the best advice, definitely talk to your family. I know we have a lot of, we're aunties to many young women,
Ah,
and young men, and we talk to them. We talk to all of them, but we really talk to the young women about what is going on, and we're very open. And I just feel like that's helpful because it just kind of passes on family history, gives them a sense of what might be normal. Sometimes they want to talk to their moms, sometimes they don't, so just being open and talking to them. And I would say in terms of going to the doctor, I've loved my physicians. However, I have learned to value going for a second opinion no matter what it is. Whether
Yeah.
it I've had so many knee surgeries. I use that. Do I always go for a second opinion? No, but do I more so now? Yes, because I think that as advancements in medicine are occurring, that we do need to seek other opinions on who is doing. You had mentioned the more experienced, who is really specializing in very specific surgeries, or even orthopedics. They now specialize in different parts of the bodies. Why wouldn't we go to a surgeon who really specializes in GYN care?
yeah, I think
And
on
I
our
would
website we have a list of questions to ask, just to, like what's your conversion rate and how many do you do a year? And
Mhm.
it's really important questions to ask. Yeah.
And
Uh,
I would say with families, start the conversation, you know, for the women who are a little older who have children. Sometimes I think we want to protect them and not really talk about those things, but it's not about protecting one another, it's about preparing one another.
mhm.
And I just remember being in the doctor's office and filling out paperwork, and then later finding out that I have a fibroid, it runs in my family. And so, had I had those conversations with my mother, I felt I would have been prepared. But at some point, we become mothers, we become aunties, we become, someone's mentor. And so, start the conversation. And then, in terms of doctors, ask the questions. You know, I know my father's generation, especially, it was almost as if the doctor was all knowing. And maybe he or she is,
Mm.
but we also play a role in what we're comfortable with. And
Yeah.
so obtaining the information so we can make an educated decision is just as important.
Yeah. And back then, like with our parents, they couldn't quickly like Google alternatives.
Exactly. Yes.
So
Yes.
like going to the
Ask the
mechanic or the
question.
doctor, it's like whatever they say. I've been to you to 20, for 20 years. Yeah, I trust
Mhm.
you. Um,
Exactly.
Another thing I keep hearing, and I would like to see more conversation about, is this watch and wait approach to fibroid management. And I'm
Yeah.
hearing that more and more. And Carolyn, you started your conversation with that. Um, and it's really heart wrenching. And I read through these surveys, and so often women are told, "Let's just keep an eye on it," and then in the end, they have fertility issues. Um, Very often, a physician will offer two options. One is watch and wait, and the other one is hysterectomy. Now, this is usually a surgeon who is maybe a generalist and not an OBGYN, and could do an open hysterectomy, but doesn't feel very comfortable with myomectomy because it's a technically difficult surgery. And then these two are so extreme. There's also an emotional attachment to the female reproductive system. But that watch and wait, that's something that we've been studying for a while, because once there's one, there's more. Like you find a mouse in your house, that they're like cousins and aunts and uncles, and babies. They're more. One fibroid, they're usually more. And unfortunately, they continue to grow. So this just gets me so upset, especially when younger women are told to watch and wait, and then they try to go have kids. So this, I don't know if I actually showed you this chart, but when we asked what happened when you followed your doctor's watch and wait approach to managing your fibroid, so 83% said the symptoms got worse. Mm-hmm. And 81% said the fibroid size increased. So it's just not a good strategy. Not a good strategy.
Yeah. And it's hopeful and wishful thinking. The doctor said, well, maybe nothing needs to be done. We can just watch and wait. No one wants surgery if it's not necessary. So that sounds like a great option. But then you get into the follow-up questions. Well, doc, what are the odds that this will grow? Well, doc, what are the long-term implications if we just watch and wait?
Yeah.
And you ask those follow-up questions, and hopefully you've got a doctor that you trust and you have a great relationship with that can answer those questions. And if not, then maybe you seek a different medical professional.
Yeah. To your point, I mean, there wasn't that much time between when they said Carolyn had fibroids and then suddenly she had a grapefruit. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Another audience comments: I went to CIGC for lap hysterectomy, but I ended up with a 5 to 20 pound fibroid that was intertwined with my appendix and other organs. I ended up with open surgery to fix all of that, including a blood transfusion. Dr. D and Dr. McCool saved my life. The sonograms need to be better so they can catch that I had one large fibroid. That does sound like a complicated case. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you were in the hands of very experienced surgeons. I'm going to scroll down here if there are any other questions, but is there anything else we would like to impart on this audience? Questions that they should be thinking about? What kind of advice do we want? Any other advice do we want to give the audience here? And then I think we're going to have a drink.
Whatever. I can't think of anything else. I'm rarely at a loss for words. But right now I am. I can't think of anything else.
I think that we actually hit on quite a lot here.
Good.
And I know that we're going to have a recap of this event published on our blog next week.
Oh, there's something that I didn't answer. You asked who was the bigger baby.
Yeah.
No. No, who was the bigger baby?
Oh, yeah, I know. Where's the triangle?
Where's the triangle?
Oh, yes.
So I just have to tell this funny story. So Dione, she said before surgery, I need a triangle. How I'm going to be weak. I'm going to be so weak. How am I going to get everybody's attention? So she came up with, she'll ring her little triangle to get help.
That's right. So, our nieces were so happy.
I love it. So it's still there.
And yes, it's still here. And she was definitely the bigger baby. But I do have one funny story. So, like I said, Dione went first, and then so we got home. I think it was a Tuesday afternoon with her. So I took care of her for Tuesday night and Wednesday night, and then I went in first thing Thursday morning. And my sister came to take care of me, and Dione thought she was going to take me too.
Yeah.
And we had to say, Dione, you can't go to the hospital with me, or not hospital, to the center with me. So you have to stay here. But she was fine to stay by herself for those hours. And so that night, though, my sister fell out and was snoring so loudly in the other room that we couldn't wake her up, even with the triangle.
Oh, no.
So Dione gets out of bed, hobbles over, and it's like, I'm going to help you. So here we are. She's trying to help me. That was a bad idea. Finally, we got my sister to come in and help both of us. It was a mess. That was a mess.
I said, oh, I think this was a bad idea.
I love the story. It's very unique. Well, thank you so much, guys. I want to raise a glass to you. I know I've been drinking throughout this whole thing, but I really appreciate you guys sharing your experience, and I think that this does help. It touches a lot of people, and I think we just need to keep talking about it. Thanks to both of you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Let's do it again sometime.
Yes.
All right, and now I'm also supposed to say there's a link to a survey, and if you would like to share your experience, you can click on the Women's Health Survey. There will also be a link at innovativegyn.com, Carolyn and Dione. And everyone who takes the survey will be entered in a chance to win a $100 gift card. Woohoo!
All right, please take the survey.
Yeah, do that. Absolutely. All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Now, how do we turn this off?